The first time my stepmom tried to erase me, she did it with a smile and a locked mailbox. The last time she did it in a ballroom full of witnesses, by calling security like I was trash she could sweep out before the bride walked in. And that last time was the one that ended her. I stepped into the wedding venue and felt the room tilt. Not because it was grand, though it was. Crystal chandeliers, white orchids climbing gold pillars, a string quartet playing something soft and expensive. 400 guests, dressed like the invitation, came with a tax bracket. The tilt came from the way people looked at me. That quick scan, the silent verdict, not invited, not wanted, not family. My stepmom, Darlene, stood near the head table with her hand resting on my father's forearm like a claim. Ivory dress, diamond earrings. The kind of calm face women wear when they've already won in private and only needed to perform the win in public. Her eyes found mine and her mouth curved, small, satisfied. "Oh," she said, loud enough for 3 tables to hear. "You actually showed up." My father's gaze flickered to me for half a second, then dropped. Like looking at me would cost him something he didn't want to pay. That familiar ache rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I'd cried for him once, years ago, until my eyes burned and the pillowcase was cold. Tonight I wasn't spending a single tear on a man who kept choosing silence. Darlene walked toward me with slow confidence. Every step said, "I own this room, I own this moment, I own your father." She stopped close enough that I could smell her perfume. Sweet at first, then sharp like chemicals when it settled in your lungs. "You're not on the list," she said, smiling like she was being kind. "This is a private event. I'm here for the wedding," I said. Her smile widened. "No, sweetheart, you're here because you can't stand being left out. But you don't get to force your way into our life anymore. Our life." As if I was a stain she'd finally scrubbed out, a few guests pretended not to listen while leaning in anyway. Phones tilted slightly. People love drama as long as they don't have to pay for it. Darlene turned her head toward a man in a black suit near the entrance. "Security." The word cracked across the room. The quartet kept playing, but softer now, like the musicians could feel the air turning. 2 guards approached. One looked uneasy, eyes apologetic. The other looked bored, like this wasn't the first time he'd been hired to escort someone out of a pretty lie. "Mom," the uneasy guard said to me, "are you an invited guest?" Darlene answered before I could. "She's not." I watched my father then. Watched him sit there, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the linen napkin he was folding and unfolding like it mattered more than his own child being thrown out. My chest went hot, not rage, something cleaner. Final. The board guard reached for my arm. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I opened my clutch and took out a single sheet of paper, not an invitation. A letter. Thick, crisp. The kind that doesn't beg or explain. The kind that states facts that don't care about feelings. Darlene laughed, too fast. "What is that? Some sad little note? A fake lawyer letter you printed at home?" I handed the paper to the uneasy guard. He read the top line, and his posture changed like someone had snapped a spine straight. His eyes moved faster. His lips pressed together. Then he looked at me again, different now. Not as a problem, as a person with authority. He turned to Darlene carefully. "Mom, this document states she is the authorized trustee and legal representative for the trust controlling the LLC that holds the venue contract." The room didn't go silent all at once. It rippled into silence like the truth had weight and was spreading outward. Darlene blinked, once. Then her smile twitched. "That's impossible," she snapped, voice tight. "Give me that." The board guard held the letter a little higher, out of her reach without being obvious about it. I watched the moment Darlene realized she couldn't simply snatch control back with her hands. Her entire life had been built on taking things that weren't hers, quietly, cleverly, with other people's reluctance doing most of the work. But paper doesn't hesitate. Paper doesn't feel guilty. Paper doesn't care that she wore ivory and called it innocence. A venue manager came hurrying over, mid-40s, sweat shining at his temples, tie slightly crooked like he'd run when he shouldn't have. He took one look at the letter in the guard's hand and went pale. "Excuse me," he said, voice careful. "Are you the trustee?" "Yes," I said. Darlene stepped forward, laugh brittle. "This is ridiculous. I am the mother of the bride. This is my event. She's trying to ruin my daughter's day." The bride, my half-sister, stood near the aisle entrance with her bouquet gripped too tightly. Her eyes were wide, but she still didn't speak. She'd learned from Darlene. If you stay quiet, you never have to choose a side. My father stood then, fast enough that his chair scraped. He looked at me like I'd pulled a weapon. Please, he said, voice low. Not here. Not here. Not in public. Not where consequences have witnesses. I stared at him. You mean, don't do what she's been doing to me for years? His face tightened, but he didn't deny it. He couldn't. Not with people watching. Darlene's voice sharpened. You were never part of this family. You're a mistake he made before he upgraded. The word mistake hit me like a memory. 13 years old, standing at the top of the stairs, hearing Darlene say the same thing through a cracked door. Hearing my father's silence answer her. My hands trembled, just a little. But my voice stayed calm. Darlene, I said softly, you just ordered security to remove me from property controlled by the trust. She scoffed. So what? I can do whatever I want. This is it triggered the clause. I cut in, not louder, just firmer. The one you never read. The venue manager's eyes dropped back to the letter like he was trying to rewind time. I'm requesting the vendor agreement folder, I said to him. Now. And I want a written record of who has been presenting themselves as authorized to sign on behalf of the trust and the LLC. Darlene's face drained. Because she remembered. The emails she'd sent. The signatures she'd forged. The way she'd introduced herself as authorized family with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged. The manager swallowed. Yes, Mom. Immediately. Darlene grabbed my father's arm. Tell them no. Tell them she's lying. My father's mouth opened. Nothing came out. And that silence, so familiar, was finally working against her instead of me. People were watching him now. Really watching. The way you watch a man who's been exposed as weak. Darlene turned back to me, voice low, venomous. If you do this, you'll leave with nothing. I'll make sure of it. I smiled, not because it was funny, because it was desperate. You've been living in my nothing for years, I said. I'm used to it. Then I took one slow breath and looked around the ballroom, at the guests, the phones, the cameras. The smiles frozen on faces that didn't know whether to clap or run. This wedding can continue, I said calmly. Or it can stop right now. A collective inhale. I looked straight at Darlene. But either way, I added, the truth is getting documented, in writing. With names. Her lips parted. For the first time, she didn't have a line ready. Because she understood what writing meant. It meant accountability. It meant law. It meant the kind of consequence she couldn't gossip her way out of. The venue manager returned with a thick folder and a tablet. His hands shook as he held them out to me. And that's when I saw it. A signature page. Darlene's name. Signed in a space she had no legal right to sign. My father's eyes followed mine to that page, and something in him broke. Darlene, he whispered, like he was seeing her for the first time. She lunged for the folder. That's private. The manager pulled it back instinctively. I raised a hand, calm, controlled. Nobody touch anything, I said. From this point forward, everything is evidence. Darlene's breath went shallow, and I realized the most satisfying part wasn't going to be shutting down her perfect day. It was going to be watching her beg to keep it, while she realized she'd built her entire life on a fraud that was now sitting in my hands. Before I go further, drop your city and local time in the comments, because I want to know where you're watching from. And tell me this, Darlene's eyes were still on that signature page like it was a snake. My half-sister stood frozen at the aisle entrance, bouquet trembling slightly, mascara perfect, smile ruined at the corners. My father looked like someone had yanked the floor out from under him, and he was still pretending he could stand on air. And I made my decision without raising my voice. I let the ceremony happen. Not because I forgave them, because I understood something Darlene never did. The best revenge isn't interruption. It's timing. I slid the folder back toward the venue manager. Slow, deliberate, like I was placing a weapon on a table. We're not shutting anything down, I said, calm enough to make Darlene's shoulders loosen for half a second. Not right now. Darlene exhaled, relief flashing across her face so fast she thought nobody caught it. But I did. I always did. I'm simply requesting, I added, eyes locked on hers, that from this moment forward you do not sign a single document, authorize a single vendor, or speak on behalf of the trust or the LLC. If you do, it becomes willful. The venue manager nodded quickly, grateful for any instruction that didn't include police. Darlene forced a laugh. Of course, because I'd never. I cut in gently. You already did. A quiet gasp came from the nearest table, and that tiny gasp was my first win of the night, because it meant people were listening now. Really listening. The ceremony began. The music swelled. Guests turned their faces toward the aisle, as if they could just decide the tension didn't exist. But the air stayed different. Darlene smiled for photos, like she wasn't bleeding internally. My father clapped at the right moments, like he hadn't just realized his wife was signing contracts she didn't have the right to touch. And my half-sister, poor, golden, protected half-sister, walked down the aisle looking like a bride who suddenly understood her fairy tale was built on someone else's stolen brick. I didn't sit at the family table. I didn't need a seat to own the room. I stood near the back, quiet still, watching the way Darlene's eyes kept flicking toward me every time someone laughed, checking if I was laughing too. I wasn't. Counting witnesses. Counting cameras. Counting exits. Counting the exact moment the reception would peak, when Darlene would feel safest, because that's when you pull the pin. At cocktail hour, she tried to repair the narrative. She moved table to table like a politician, touching shoulders, smiling, whispering. I caught pieces as I passed. She's unstable. She's always been jealous. She showed up to ruin. Poor thing, she's not well. That was her favorite trick. If you can't control the truth, destroy the person holding it. She didn't notice the venue manager watching her now, or the guard, or the bartender who had heard my name attached to the word trustee and had started listening the way staff listen when rich people might not pay. Darlene drifted toward me near the champagne wall, smile sharpened and ready. She lowered her voice. You got your little moment. Are you done? I lifted my eyes slowly. Are you? Her smile tightened. You don't understand how this works. You can't just walk in and... I didn't walk in, I said softly. I was here before you. She blinked. Excuse me? I let the words settle, not dramatic, not loud. Just factual. You married into this family, I continued. I was born into it. That's why paper recognizes me and not you. Her throat bobbed. Paper recognizes money. I almost smiled. Because she still didn't understand the part that would end her. It recognizes instructions, I corrected, and fiduciary duty. That phrase, fiduciary duty, hit her like cold water. For the first time, her voice wavered. Who put you in charge? I looked past her, straight to my father across the room. He was watching us. He looked like a man trying to remember which lies he'd agreed to. Grandma, I said. Darlene's face went still, not frozen, terrified. Because Grandma, my father's mother, had hated Darlene, quietly, politely, with that old money kind of hatred where you never raise your voice, you just change your will. Darlene swallowed. Your grandmother was senile. My father flinched like she'd slapped his mother's grave. I leaned in just enough for Darlene to hear what I wanted her to hear. She wasn't senile, I said. She was strategic. Darlene's eyes flicked toward the doors. Escape. Then she tried her last weapon, shame. You're doing this because nobody loves you, she whispered. Because you couldn't make it on your own. Because you need to steal your father's attention on his daughter's day. I held her gaze. I made it on my own, I said, calm. That's why you're scared. Her nostrils flared. And I'm not stealing attention, I added. I'm collecting evidence. Then I stepped around her and walked straight to the venue manager. Excuse me, I said, friendly, like we were discussing flower arrangements. Could you please direct me to the AV coordinator? He blinked. Yes, of course. Darlene's head snapped toward me. What are you doing? I didn't answer her. Because the second you explain your revenge, you give the enemy time to build a defense. The reception started. Light dimmed. Music turned warmer. People loosened up. Dinner plates clinked, wine poured, laughter returned, forced at first, then real as alcohol did its work. Darlene transformed. She became the hostess again. The queen. The woman who believed she had survived. And I let her. I let her walk up to the microphone. I let her tap the glass. I let her smile as the room quieted. My beautiful daughter, she began, voice syrupy. This day is proof that love always wins. My half-sister smiled like a doll, eyes shiny. My father stood beside Darlene, hand on her back, the supportive husband. And I watched the cameras swing toward them. Watched people lift phones. Watched the AV screen behind them glow softly, ready for the slideshow. Ready. Darlene continued. Some people try to tear families apart. Some people bring negativity. Her eyes flicked to me. But we don't let them, she said, sweet as venom. We rise above. A few guests laughed politely. My father's jaw clenched. I could have ended it with the signature page. But I didn't come for a win. I came for a collapse. I raised my hand slightly to the AV coordinator at the side of the room. He nodded, subtle. Because I'd already spoken to him, calmly, professionally. I'd shown him my trustee letter. I'd given him one instruction. When I text you, now, you play the file, no questions. My phone buzzed once. A message from the venue manager. The order folder is secured. Statements prepared. Perfect. I typed one word to the AV coordinator, now. The slideshow behind Darlene flickered. She didn't notice at first. She was enjoying her power too much. Then the screen changed, not to baby photos, not to engagement pictures, to a clean scan of a document. Large, readable, a signature page. And at the bottom, in dark ink, Darlene's name, signed where it should never have been signed. A murmur rolled through the room. Darlene's voice stuttered. What? What is this? The microphone made her confusion loud. My father turned, eyes widening. The bride's smile dropped completely, and I walked forward, slow, calm, not a villain. Just a woman who was done being erased. Darlene forced a laugh into the mic. This is some kind of sick joke. I stopped near the front, still not taking the microphone, because I didn't need it. The room was already listening. I looked at the crowd and spoke with the kind of calm that makes people lean in. That is a vendor authorization page, I said, clear enough to carry. Signed by someone who had no legal authority to sign it. Darlene's face went white, my father's mouth opened. Darlene, she snapped, too loud, too sharp. Turn it off. But the AV coordinator didn't move. Because paper outranked her, I raised my phone slightly. I have the full agreement folder, I continued, time-stamped emails, vendor statements, and a written record of who represented themselves as authorized. Darlene stared at me like she was seeing a ghost that knew the law. My father took one step away from her, just one. But the room saw it, and Darlene saw it too. She tried to save herself the only way she knew. Attack. She's lying. She screamed into the mic, losing the syrup, losing the mask. She's always been a liar. She's doing this because she's bitter. My half-sister whispered, Mom, stop. Darlene turned on her. Don't you start. That was the moment the room truly turned. Not because of the document. Because of her. Because the elegant stepmother had vanished, and what was left was a woman who talked to her own daughter like an enemy. I finally stepped closer to the microphone, but I didn't grab it. I looked at my father. Say I'm lying, I said quiet. His eyes darted to the screen, to the signature, to the witnesses, to the cameras. He couldn't. He swallowed hard and said the most devastating thing he could say to Darlene without shouting. I need to see the rest of it. Darlene's breath hitched. Because that sentence meant one thing. He believed me enough to investigate. And for Darlene, investigation was death. I leaned into the mic for the first time. Voice steady, almost gentle. Darlene, I said, you wanted me out of this family so badly you tried to sign me out of existence. The room held its breath. But you made one mistake, I continued. You did it on paper. Darlene shook her head rapidly. No, no. I glanced at the screen again, then back to the crowd. And paper doesn't care who you bullied to get it, I said. Paper only cares who has authority. I let that land. Then I added softer, crueler, because it was soft. And tonight, in front of everyone, you just proved you never had any. Darlene's knees visibly weakened. My half-sister started crying quietly. My father looked like he might throw up. And I still hadn't opened the second envelope, because the second envelope wasn't about the wedding. It was about the trust. It was about Grandma's real plan. And it was about to turn Darlene's perfect life into a legal cage she couldn't scream her way out of. Drop your city plus local time in the comments and tell me, after seeing her signature on that screen, my father's hands were shaking when I slid the second envelope across the linen toward him. Not dramatically, not like a movie, like a man who'd spent years pretending he didn't see the rot, finally being forced to touch it. Darlene was still at the mic, breathing too loud, mascara starting to break at the edges. The screen behind her still showed her signature like a spotlight that wouldn't turn off. Guests weren't even trying to hide their phones anymore, and I didn't look at Darlene when I spoke. I looked at him. Not here, I said softly. Not for them. His eyes flicked up. What is this? It's what you refused to open when it mattered, I replied. So you're opening it now. He swallowed. His fingers pinched the flap like it could bite him. Darlene's voice cracked into the mic, desperate. Whatever she gave you, don't. She's manipulating you. He didn't answer her. That silence, his silence, was finally pointed in the right direction. He stood slowly from the head table, envelope in hand, and the room hushed the way it does when power changes owners. I need a private room, he said to the venue manager. The manager nodded immediately, grateful to follow the person everyone still assumed was in charge. Until 5 minutes ago. Darlene stepped forward, smile forcing itself back onto her face like a mask being glued on. Honey, my father didn't even look at her. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life his eyes didn't slide away. Come, he said, one word. But it was the first time he'd ever invited me into the place where decisions were made. They led us to a small side suite used for bridal touch-ups, soft lighting, a mirror rimmed in bulbs, a couch that still smelled like hairspray and roses. As soon as the door shut, the noise of the reception dimmed into a muffled throb. My father sat down hard, like his legs had finally admitted the truth. He stared at the envelope. Then he looked up at me, voice rough. "Tell me I'm not about to ruin my daughter's wedding." I didn't soften. "Because soft is what kept me trapped." "You're not ruining it," I said. "Because you're saving her from a life built on fraud." His jaw clenched. "Darlene wouldn't." I tilted my head slightly. "She signed where she shouldn't." "You saw that?" He exhaled through his nose, pained. "I saw a lot tonight." "Good. Let it hurt." He slid a finger under the flap and opened the envelope. Inside was one thick, folded document, small, and a small sealed letter with a wax stamp pressed into the corner. Grandma's. The moment he saw that stamp, his face changed. Not confusion. Recognition. Fear. Because Grandma didn't do sentimental. Grandma did instructions. My father unfolded the main document first. His eyes scanned, then stopped. Then went back up as if he couldn't believe the words were still there. His mouth opened slightly. "Fiduciary removal," he whispered. I didn't speak. I let him read. Let him feel the full weight of what his mother had done. Because she'd known. She'd known exactly what kind of woman Darlene was. And she'd built a trap so clean it didn't even require anger. It required patience. My father's hands trembled harder as he reached the section with names. He read Darlene's name out loud, like it tasted bitter. Then he read mine, then his. He looked up, eyes wet but not crying. "This says, Darlene can't be a beneficiary." I nodded. "She never could." His throat worked. "And it says, if she tries to represent herself. She triggers removal," I finished softly. "Automatic, no warnings, no second chances." He stared down again, voice breaking. "My mother planned this." "Yes," I said, "because she saw what you refused to see." My father flinched. He turned the page. His breathing changed. Faster. Worse. Then he hit the part that made his face just gentler. The part I hadn't even needed to read twice. He whispered, "No contest clause?" I leaned forward slightly. "If she challenges any of it, she loses everything connected to the trust." He looked up, desperate. "But she said she paid for." "She said a lot," I replied. "She also said I was a mistake." My father's eyes squeezed shut for 1 second. When they opened again, something was different. The softness was gone. The denial was gone. Only the math remained. He picked up the smaller sealed letter, the one with Grandma's stamp. He hesitated like it was holy. Then he broke it. Inside, Grandma's handwriting. Sharp, controlled, no wasted strokes. He read silently at first, then his lips moved. Then he whispered, the line he could say loud enough even in private. She wrote, "If you're reading this, you finally stop being a coward." My father swallowed a sound that wasn't a sob but wasn't far from it. I watched him read the rest. Watched the shame crawl up his neck. Because Grandma had named every excuse he'd ever used to stay quiet. Then he reached the last paragraph. His eyes locked on it. His breath stopped. He looked up at me like he'd been punched. "This letter says," his voice cracked, "it says you were always meant to be trustee." I nodded once. "I already told you." He shook his head slowly, disbelief turning into grief, and I let her. He couldn't finish. I didn't comfort him. Not yet. Because comfort is what men like him use to escape consequences. Instead, I slid my phone across the table and opened the folder of screenshots. Mails, vendor approvals, Darlene's signature, timestamps. "This is the evidence," I said. "Tonight isn't about humiliation. Tonight is about documentation." He stared at the screen. Then he whispered, "This is fraud." "Yes." His voice went cold. "And she did it under my name." "Yes." Silence. Then finally he asked the right question, "What do I do?" I leaned back slightly, calm. "You go back out there," I said, "and you don't scream. You don't make a scene. You don't give her the chance to play victim." He nodded, barely breathing. "You do what paper demands," I continued. "You remove her access. You tell the venue manager, quietly, that all authorizations must go through you or me. You call the attorney in the morning. And you stop protecting her." My father's jaw tightened. "Tonight," I added, "you make one announcement." His eyes flicked up. "What?" I looked at him the way Grandma must have. The way a person looks at someone who has one last chance to choose decency. "You say," I told him, "that the trust's legal representative will be handling all contractual matters from this moment forward, and that anyone who misrepresented authority will be addressed immediately." He stared at me. "That will destroy her." I held his gaze. "She destroyed herself. You just stopped hiding the wreckage." My father stood slowly, envelope and letter in hand. He looked older, smaller, but also, finally, awake. At the door he paused, and for the first time ever, he said the words I should have heard as a child. "I'm sorry, it wasn't enough, but it was real." I nodded once. "Go," I said. He opened the door, the muffled music rushed back in, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the illusion. And then my father walked back into the reception, not to smile beside Darlene, but to enter authority with a sentence so calm it would be fatal. From the doorway, I watched him approach the mic. Watched Darlene's face brighten thinking he'd save her. Watched him place his hand gently on her wrist, like a husband, and lifted off the microphone. Then he looked at the room and said, steady and clear, "From this moment forward, all trust and vendor authorizations will be handled through legal counsel and the trustee. Any unauthorized signatures will be investigated." Darlene laughed. "Too sharp, what are you?" My father turned his head toward her, calm as winter. "Darlene," he said, not loud, not angry, just final. "Stop speaking for things you don't own." Her smile collapsed. Because in that one sentence, he did what he'd never done before. He chose. And I stood in the back of the room, quiet, breathing evenly, watching the woman who built her power on my father's silence realize. His silence was gone. "Now tell me," after he said that line in public. Darlene didn't scream right away. That's what made it terrifying. She stood there under the chandelier light, with her smile half alive, half dead, like a painting that had started to peel in front of everyone. Her eyes kept darting, guest to guest, phone to phone, searching for an ally the way a drowning person searches for air. My father handed the microphone back to the coordinator without looking at her again. And that small act, no speech, no announcement, no let's talk later, was the real escort. Because it told the room, she's not the voice anymore. Darlene turned, slow, careful, playing soft. "Honey," she said, voice sweet enough to fool strangers, "can we step aside? Just for a minute?" My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "No," he said, one word. And it hit Darlene harder than any slap, because it was the first time the door didn't open when she knocked. She tried again, lower. "You're embarrassing our family." I watched my father breathe in through his nose, controlled. "You embarrassed us," he said evenly. "When you signed what you didn't own." Her cheeks twitched. The smile faltered. Then she did the thing she always did when charm failed. She turned vicious. She snapped her head toward me at the back of the room, like I was a target that could fix everything if she just destroyed it. "This is her," she blurted, loud enough to turn heads again. "She's poisoning you. She's always been jealous. She came here to ruin your daughter's day." My half-sister flinched at the word ruin, like it stabbed. She looked at my father, pleading, desperate to rewind time. But my father didn't look at her. He looked at Darlene. "Stop," he said, calm but lethal. "You don't get to blame her for your signatures." Darlene's throat tightened. Her eyes glistened, not tears yet, but the threat of them. And she played her last card, the victim. She pressed a hand to her chest, shaking her head slowly as if she couldn't believe the cruelty of it all. "After everything I've done," she whispered, voice trembling just enough to sound real. "After I raised your daughter, after I kept this family together, you're going to humiliate me. Like this." The room wavered for a second. Some people love a villain until the villain cries. That's why I didn't move. That's why I didn't speak. Because the most dangerous moment isn't when a manipulator is exposed. It's when they try to become fragile. My father didn't fall for it. He gestured, subtle, toward the uneasy security guard. The same one who had read the trustee letter. The guard stepped forward, careful, respectful. "Mom," he said quietly to Darlene, "we need to ask you to come with us." Darlene's eyes widened like she couldn't believe the audacity. "Excuse me," she snapped, volume rising. "I'm the mother of the bride." The guard's voice didn't change. "We've been instructed by the venue's authorized representatives to escort you to a private area." Darlene looked around, hunting for someone, Anion, who would stand up and say, "This is wrong." A bridesmaid looked away. A groomsman pretended to sip water. A guest lowered their phone but didn't stop recording. And my father stood still, hands at his sides, face blank. That blank face was the boundary. Darlene's voice rose, shrill now, cracking. "You can't do this to me in front of everyone." The guard didn't touch her yet. He didn't have to. The humiliation was already doing the work. My half-sister stepped forward, tears finally spilling. "Mom, please. Just come with them." Darlene spun on her. "Don't you tell me what to do. The bride recoiled, shocked, like she'd never been spoken to that way in public. And in that recoil, Darlene lost the last sympathetic witness she had. My father's voice cut through, calm as steel. "Darlene," he said, "go. Not please. Not let's talk, just go." Darlene's mouth opened, closed, opened again. And then she did something worse than screaming. She laughed. A thin, ugly laugh that made the hairs on my arms rise. "You think you've won?" she hissed, eyes locked on my father. "You think she's going to love you now? After you finally noticed her?" "You're too late." My father's jaw tightened, and I thought, here it comes, the apology, the emotion, the scene. But he didn't give her that satisfaction. He simply said, "Enough." The guard stepped closer. Another guard appeared at his side, not aggressive, just present. Darlene realized the room had decided. Not with votes, with silence. She straightened her dress like she still had dignity, lifted her chin, and walked, fast, toward the side doors, escorted but not touched. As she passed my table, her eyes found mine, and all the years poured out of that look. The lost letters, the stolen calls, the way she'd trained my father to see me as a problem. Her lips moved without sound, but I didn't need to hear it, because I'd already answered her years ago with the one thing she couldn't steal. I stayed calm, I stayed standing, I stayed real. She disappeared through the side door, and the room exhaled like it had been holding its breath for years. The music tried to restart. The DJ cleared his throat into the mic, too cheerful. "All right, everyone, let's get back to celebrating the happy couple." But celebration doesn't snap back to normal after a mask falls off. It reshapes. People whispered in clusters, eyes bright with gossip that would outlive the cake. My father turned toward the head table, like a man walking back to a life he didn't recognize. He paused at my side. Not dramatic, just paused. "I want the attorney's number," he said quietly. I handed him my phone without a word. He stared at the screen, then swallowed hard. "And I want everything, every email, every signature." "You'll have it," I said. His voice went rough. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I held his gaze. "I tried, that was all. No speech, no tears, just the truth in one sentence." He flinched like it finally landed. Then he nodded once, small, humiliated, real, and went to the venue manager, spoke in low tones. The manager nodded repeatedly, like his life depended on obedience. And just like that, something shifted, not in the room, in the family. Because for the first time, the person who had been protected was removed. And the person who had been ignored was now the one holding the documents. Across the ballroom, my half-sister stood alone near the cake, face blotchy from crying, veil slightly crooked. She looked like she didn't know who she was without Darlene controlling the story. She took a step toward me, then stopped. Fear in her eyes, not of me, but of the truth I carried. I didn't move first. I let her come to her own boundary. She walked up slowly, voice small. Is it true?" I didn't ask what she meant. We both knew. "Yes," I said. Her lips trembled. "Did she do this for years?" I looked past her at the empty space where Darlene had stood. "Yes." A tear slid down my half-sister's cheek. Why didn't Dad stop her? That question wasn't for me. But I answered anyway. Because sometimes the truth is the only mercy. Because stopping her would have meant admitting he chose silence, I said softly. She stared at me like she'd never heard anyone speak about him that way. Then she whispered, "What happens now?" I glanced toward the side door Darlene had exited through. "Now," I said, calm. "We don't chase her. We don't argue. We don't beg her to understand." I lifted my phone slightly. "Now we let paper do what emotions never could." My half-sister swallowed. "Is she going to jail?" I said honestly. "But she's going to lose access." That was the real punishment for someone like Darlene, not handcuffs. Doors closing, accounts changing, authority disappearing, because power was her oxygen. And tonight, she'd been escorted out of the room where she breathed. My father returned to the head table, lifted his glass, and made a short announcement. "No names, no drama, just control. Thank you for your patience. We're going to continue this evening privately and respectfully." Respectfully. That word mattered. Because it was the first time he'd used it like a weapon to protect someone other than Darlene. The DJ restarted the music, softer this time. People danced again, but carefully, like they were stepping around broken glass. And I stood at the back, watching the cameras catch my father, wiping his hands on his suit pants, like he was trying to erase fingerprints from a crime he'd enabled. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Hargrove. "I can file the emergency protective order for the trust accounts by morning. Confirm." I stared at the screen. Darlene wasn't just out of the ballroom. She could still run tonight, call banks, move money, delete emails, spin stories. This was the moment where calm revenge becomes permanent. I typed back one word: confirm. And as I hit send, I felt it: quiet, deep, satisfying. Not joy, not gloating, relief. Because for the first time in my life, Darlene couldn't rewrite the ending. Darlene didn't scream right away. That's what made it terrifying. She stood there under the chandelier light with her smile, half alive, half dead, like a painting that had started to peel in front of everyone. Her eyes kept darting, guest to guest, phone to phone, searching for an ally the way a drowning person searches for air. My father handed the microphone back to the coordinator without looking at her again. And that small act, no speech, no announcement, no "let's talk later," was the real escort, because it told the room she's not the voice anymore. Darlene turned, slow, careful, playing soft. "Honey," she said, voice sweet enough to fool strangers, "can we step aside? Just for a minute?" My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "No," he said, one word. And it hit Darlene harder than any slap, because it was the first time the door didn't open when she knocked. She tried again, lower. "You're embarrassing our family." I watched my father breathe in through his nose, controlled. "You embarrassed us," he said evenly, "when you signed what you didn't own." Her cheeks twitched. The smile faltered. Then she did the thing she always did when charm failed. She turned vicious. She snapped her head toward me at the back of the room like I was a target that could fix everything if she just destroyed it. "This is her," she blurted, loud enough to turn heads again. "She's poisoning you. She's always been jealous. She came here to ruin your daughter's day." My half-sister flinched at the word ruin, like it stabbed. She looked at my father, pleading, desperate to rewind time. But my father didn't look at her. He looked at Darlene. "Stop," he said, calm but lethal. "You don't get to blame her for your signatures." Darlene's throat tightened, her eyes glistened. Not tears yet, but the threat of them. And she played her last card, the victim. She pressed a hand to her chest, shaking her head slowly, as if she couldn't believe the cruelty of it all. "After everything I've done," she whispered, voice trembling just enough to sound real. "After I raised your daughter, after I kept this family together, you're going to humiliate me, like this?" The room wavered for a second. Some people love a villain until the villain cries. That's why I didn't move. That's why I didn't speak, because the most dangerous moment isn't when a manipulator is exposed. It's when they try to become fragile. My father didn't fall for it. He gestured, subtle, toward the uneasy security guard, the same one who had read the trustee letter. The guard stepped forward, careful, respectful. "Mom," he said quietly to Darlene, "we need to ask you to come with us." Darlene's eyes widened like she couldn't believe the audacity. "Excuse me," she snapped, volume rising. "I'm the mother of the bride." The guard's voice didn't change. "We've been instructed by the venue's authorized representatives to escort you to a private area." Darlene looked around, hunting for someone, anyone. Who would stand up and say, "This is wrong"? A bridesmaid looked away. A groomsman pretended to sip water. A guest lowered their phone but didn't stop recording. And my father stood still, hands at his sides, face blank. That blank face was the boundary. Darlene's voice rose, shrill now, cracking. "You can't do this to me in front of everyone." The guard didn't touch her yet. He didn't have to. The humiliation was already doing the work. My half-sister stepped forward, tears finally spilling. "Mom, please, just come with them." Darlene spun on her. "Don't you tell me what to do." The bride recoiled, shocked, like she'd never been spoken to that way in public. And in that recoil, Darlene lost the last sympathetic witness she had. My father's voice cut through, calm as steel. "Darlene," he said, "go. Not please. Not let's talk. Just go." Darlene's mouth opened, closed, open again. And then she did something worse than screaming. She laughed. A thin, ugly laugh that made the hairs on my arms rise. "You think you've won," she hissed, eyes locked on my father. "You think she's going to love you now? After you finally noticed her?" "You're too late." My father's jaw tightened, and I thought, here it comes. The apology, the emotion, the scene. But he didn't give her that satisfaction. He simply said, "Enough." The guard stepped closer. Another guard appeared at his side, not aggressive, just present. Darlene realized the room had decided. Not with votes, with silence. She straightened her dress like she still had dignity, lifted her chin, and walked fast, toward the side doors, escorted but not touched. As she passed my table, her eyes found mine, and all the years poured out of that look. The lost letters, the stolen calls, the way she'd trained my father to see me as a problem. Her lips moved without sound. but I didn't need to hear it, because I'd already answered her years ago with the one thing she couldn't steal. I stayed calm, I stayed standing, I stayed real. She disappeared through the side door, and the room exhaled like it had been holding its breath for years. The music tried to restart. The DJ cleared his throat into the mic, too cheerful. All right, everyone, let's get back to celebrating the happy couple. But celebration doesn't snap back to normal after a mask falls off. It reshapes. People whispered in clusters, eyes bright with gossip that would outlive the cake. My father turned toward the head table like a man walking back to a life he didn't recognize. He paused at my side. Not dramatic, just paused. I want the attorney's number, he said quietly. I handed my phone without a word. He stared at the screen, then swallowed hard. And I want everything. Every email. Every signature. You'll have it, I said. His voice went rough. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I held his gaze. I tried. That was all. No speech, no tears. Just the truth in one sentence. He flinched like it finally landed. Then he nodded once. Small, humiliated, real. And went to the venue manager. Spoke in slow tones. The manager nodded repeatedly, like his life depended on obedience. And just like that, something shifted. Not in the room, in the family. Because for the first time, the person who had been protected was removed. And the person who had been ignored was now the one holding the documents. Across the ballroom, my half-sister stood alone near the cake, face blotchy from crying, veil slightly crooked. She looked like she didn't know who she was without Darlene controlling the story. She took a step toward me, then stopped. Fear in her eyes, not of me, but of the truth I carried. I didn't move first. I let her come to her own boundary. She walked up slowly, voice small. Is it true? I didn't ask what she meant. We both knew. Yes, I said. Her lips trembled. Did she do this for years? I looked past her at the empty space where Darlene had stood. Yes. A tear slid down my half-sister's cheek. Why didn't Dad stop her? That question wasn't for me. But I answered anyway, because sometimes the truth is the only mercy. Because stopping her would have meant admitting he chose silence, I said softly. She stared at me like she'd never heard anyone speak about him that way. Then she whispered, What happens now? I glanced toward the side door. Darlene had exited through. Now, I said calm. We don't chase her. We don't argue. We don't beg her to understand. I lifted my phone slightly. Now we let paper do what emotions never could. My half-sister swallowed. Is she going to jail? I don't know, I said honestly. But she's going to lose access. That was the real punishment for someone like Darlene. Not handcuffs. Doors closing. Accounts changing. Authority disappearing, because power was her oxygen. And tonight, she'd been escorted out of the room where she breathed. My father went to the head table, lifted his glass, and made a short announcement. No names, no drama, just control. Thank you for your patience. We're going to continue this evening privately and respectfully. Respectfully. That word mattered. Because it was the first time he'd used it like a weapon to protect someone other than Darlene. The DJ restarted the music, softer this time. People danced again, but carefully, like they were stepping around broken glass. And I stood at the back, watching the cameras catch my father, wiping his hands on his suit pants like he was trying to erase fingerprints from a crime he'd enabled. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Hargrove. I can file the emergency protective order for the trust accounts by morning. Confirm. I stared at the screen. Darlene wasn't just out of the ballroom. She could still run tonight, call banks, move money, delete emails, spin stories. This was the moment where calm revenge becomes permanent. I typed back one word, confirm. And as I hit send, I felt it quiet, deep, satisfying. Not joy, not gloating, relief. Because for the first time in my life, Darlene couldn't rewrite the ending. The next morning, my phone didn't wake me up. Silence did. The kind that comes after a storm, when your body is still braced for screaming. But the house is too quiet, like even the walls are holding their breath. At 6:12 a.m., one notification slid across my screen. Hargrove Law, emergency protective instructions submitted. Accounts flagged. Access restricted pending trustee verification. No fireworks. No dramatic music. Just a sentence that meant Darlene's favorite weapon, money, had been taken out of her hands before she even brushed her teeth. I sat up slowly and stared at the sedge until my eyes stopped stinging. Then the second wave hit. 68 missed calls, all from my father. A few from unknown numbers, likely Darlene using other phones, other people, other masks. And one voicemail. Not from him. From her. I didn't play it immediately, because I've learned this the hard way. The first thing a manipulator does when they feel consequences is rush to control your emotions. If you let them shake you, they get time. I washed my face, made coffee I didn't drink, stood at the kitchen window and watched the city wake up like nothing had happened. Then I pressed play. Darlene's voice filled the room, sweet, breathy, wounded. Hi, it's me. Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to fix this now. Banks are calling. The card isn't working. Vendors are texting your father. You've embarrassed us enough. Her tone shifted, subtle, practiced. You want to punish me? Fine. But don't punish your sister. Don't punish your father. Then the sweetness slipped, a harder edge. I know things, okay? Things you don't want out. You think paper makes you powerful? Paper burns, and people believe the person who's crying. A pause. Then the line she thought would break me. You were never supposed to be a trustee. That wasn't your grandmother's plan. That letter? That envelope? Your father didn't even know it existed. My stomach tightened. Not fear, recognition, because that was the tell. When Darlene lies, she always includes one detail that's too specific, because she's trying to convince herself as much as you. I didn't call her back. I called my father. He answered on the first ring, voice ragged like he hadn't slept. Where are you? At home, I said. A shaky exhale. She's at the bank. She's screaming. They won't let her withdraw. They asked for the trustee. They asked for you. I closed my eyes. There it was. The moment she'd spent years trying to avoid. A public desk. A name on a file. A signature that didn't match. She's telling everyone you're unstable, he added quickly, like he was ashamed it still mattered. She's saying you hacked. Let her talk, I said, calm. Talking doesn't move money. He went quiet. Then, smaller. What do? I could have said 100 things. I could have finally emptied my chest into the phone and made him carry it. But revenge isn't volume. It's structure. You do what you did last night, I said. You stay calm. You don't defend her. You don't defend me. You defend the facts. A pause. Then he asked, are they frozen? Completely? Restricted, I corrected. Flagged. She can't touch what she shouldn't touch. His breath hitched like relief and grief collided. She's saying she'll sue. She's saying she'll challenge the trust. I almost smiled. That's the no contest clause, I said. If she challenges, she loses everything tied to it. My father swallowed. My mother, really. She really did, I said. She built a cage out of paper. He didn't speak for a moment. Then quietly, the venue manager emailed me. He attached a statement. He says Darlene signed as authorized representative 3 times this month. 3 times. Not a mistake, a pattern. My father's voice went flat. She did it under my name. Which is why this stops being family drama, I said, and starts being liability. He whispered, I didn't know. I didn't comfort him, not yet, because comfort can come after repair. Meet me at Hargrove's office, I said. In 1 hour. He hesitated. Darlene will follow me. Let her, I replied. She won't get past reception. At 8:03 a.m., I walked into Hargrove Law and saw my father already there, sitting stiffly, suit wrinkled, eyes bruised from no sleep, hands clasped like prayer. He stood when he saw me like he wanted to do something. Hug, apologize, explain, and he did none of it. He just nodded. Respect, that was new. Hargrove came out with a folder thicker than anything Darlene had ever held, because her power was always performance. His power was procedure. Good morning, he said, professional. Trustee. Darlene's voice exploded from behind us. There she is. We both turned. Darlene stormed into the lobby like a woman who believed volume was authority, hair thrown up messily. Sunglasses on indoors, phone in hand like a weapon. 2 steps behind her, my half-sister, eyes red, face pale, wearing yesterday's expensive makeup like armor. Darlene pointed at me. You did this. You froze my accounts. You're trying to steal my family. Hargrove didn't flinch. He didn't even look at her first. He looked at the receptionist. Please call building security, he said calmly, and notify them we have an unauthorized individual attempting to interfere with a fiduciary matter. Darlene froze. Elite, she laughed sharp. I'm his wife. Hargrove finally faced her. Mom, he said, voice even. Marriage does not grant you authority over a trust you are not named in, nor does it grant you the right to sign on behalf of an LLC you do not control. Darlene's jaw tightened. I controlled everything. My father's voice cut in, quiet, exhausted, final. No, he said. You pretended you did. Darlene snapped her head to him like she couldn't believe his betrayal. You're choosing her? She hissed. After all I've done? My father didn't raise his voice. He just said the sentence that broke her. I'm choosing the truth. My half-sister made a small sound, half sob, half gasp. Darlene's face twisted. You're all going to regret this. Then she lunged. Toward my father, not me, because she knew I wasn't the weak link anymore. She grabbed his sleeve. Tell them to fix it. Tell them you authorize me. My father peeled her fingers off his suit like removing something sticky. I don't, he said. Darlene's eyes went wild. And that's when security arrived. 2 men in dark uniforms, calm, practiced. Mom, one said, you need to leave. Darlene's spun on them. This is a private family issue. Hargrove's tone didn't change. It's a legal issue now, he said. And it's documented. That word, documented, hit Darlene like a door slamming. She jerked her head toward me, voice suddenly low and venomous. You think you're safe because you have paper, she whispered. Paper doesn't tell people what you really are. I stepped closer, calm enough to make her tremble. You're right, I said softly. Paper doesn't tell people what I am. I glanced at my father, then back at her. It tells them what you did. Darlene's breath hitched, because that was the shift. I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was presenting her. Security escorted her out, not with hands, not with force, just with presence. And as she was walked toward the doors, she threw one last line over her shoulder, desperate to poison the room. She's not even his real daughter. The lobby went silent. My half-sister sucked in a sharp breath like she'd been punched. My father went completely still. Hargrove's eyebrows lifted, just slightly. And I stood there, coffee bitter calm in my mouth, heart suddenly cold. Because Darlene didn't say that as an insult. She said it like a threat, like leverage, like she'd been holding it. I looked at my father. He didn't blink. He whispered almost to himself. What did she mean? I didn't answer right away. Because I felt the story split open. A bigger secret beneath the trust. Beneath the wedding. Beneath the years of cruelty. And I realized why Grandma had made me trustee. Not just to protect assets. To protect me from what Darlene would do when she finally lost control. I turned to Hargrove, voice steady even as my hands went numb. Do we have the file? I asked. Hargrove nodded once. We do. Then he opened the folder and slid out a thin envelope, medical records request, sealed and stamped. And on the top corner, in clean black print, were 3 words that made my stomach drop. Paternity verification request. My half-sister started crying quietly. My father sat down like his legs stopped working, and I stayed standing. Because I've learned that when the truth is coming, you don't sit, you brace. My father didn't touch the envelope at first. He just stared at it, like it could bite through paper and find the softest part of him. My half-sister sat in the corner of Hargrove's conference room, with her hands over her mouth, trying not to make noise while she cried. Like even her grief was something she'd been trained to keep pretty. Outside the glass wall, the office moved on. Phones rang, printers hummed. Someone laughed quietly at a desk. Inside, the air felt heavier than the furniture. Hargrove didn't dramatize it. He slid the paternity request closer and spoke like he was reading weather. Your mother left instructions, he said to my father. Not a suggestion. Instructions. Trustee access only. My father's throat worked. My mother left a paternity request? Hargrove nodded. And a sealed memorandum that triggers specific trust actions depending on the result. My father blinked slowly. Depending on the result. I finally spoke. Comms, because calm is the only way to keep a room from exploding. She didn't just build a trust, I said. She built a firewall. My father's eyes lifted to mine, wet and raw. What are you saying? I held his gaze. I'm saying she expected Darlene to weaponize this. And she made sure paper would be stronger than gossip. He flinched at the name like it still had claws. My phone buzzed again. Hargrove's assistant. 1 line. Process server confirmed. Darlene was served outside the bank. Served. There it was. The first real consequence that couldn't be screamed at. I slid the phone across the table so my father could see it. He stared, then closed his eyes like he was trying to swallow his whole life in one breath. My half-sister whispered, Is she going to come after us? Hargrove answered before I could. She will try. That's why we moved first. I nodded once. We already are. Then I looked at my father. You asked what she meant. His jaw tightened. Yes, I didn't soften it. Softness is what kept me quiet for years. Darlene didn't throw that out as an insult, I said. She threw it out because she thought it would make you panic and grab her hand again. My father's voice broke. I would never. I cut in gently, not cruel, just precise. You did, for years. Not with words, with silence, that landed. He didn't argue, he couldn't. Hargrove placed a pen on the table and a 1-page consent form beside it. If you want clarity, we can do it clean today. Private lab, chain of custody, no room for tampering. My father stared at the pen like it was a verdict. And then, quietly, almost ashamed, he asked, "Do you want to do it?" The question wasn't legal. It was human. It was the first time he'd asked what I wanted instead of what would keep Darlene calm. I took a breath. "Not because I need you to be my father," I said. "I already raised myself. I want it because I'm done letting her hold secrets like a knife to my throat." My half-sister stood up, tears on her cheeks. If it's true, does that mean you're not my sister?" I turned to her, voice steady. "Blood didn't make you my sister. What we survived did." Her face crumpled. She nodded like that hurt and helped at the same time. My father picked up the pen. His hand shook. Then he signed, and in that simple motion, ink on paper, he finally chose something other than denial. The lab was quiet in a way that felt insulting. No chandelier, no music, no audience. Just fluorescent light, antiseptic air, and a technician who treated family earthquakes like routine. Swabs, seals, labels, chain of custody signatures, paper after paper after paper. Darlene would have hated it, because it was control without performance. We walked out with a receipt and a timeline. "My mother planned everything," my father whispered, like he was talking to himself. I didn't comfort him. "Not yet. She planned for what you wouldn't," I replied. He nodded once, swallowing hard. "How long? 48 hours, Hargrove said. My half-sister clutched her phone like she was afraid she'd vanish if she let go. Outside, the morning sun was too bright for what we were carrying. That afternoon, Darlene made her first real move. Not the crying voicemail, not the threats. She went straight for the only thing she thought still belonged to her, the narrative. By 3:10 p.m., my father's phone was blowing up. Texts from family friends, cousins, distant relatives who only appeared when there was blood in the water. "She says you cheated. She says the trust is illegal. She says your daughter is extorting you. She says she has proof. Proof." My father's hands shook again. "She's going to destroy us." I looked at him the way Grandma would have. "No," I said. "She's going to expose herself." He stared at me. "How can you be so calm?" "Because I'd already lived through the worst part," I wanted to say, because the worst part wasn't rumors. The worst part was being a child and realizing your father's love had conditions. But I didn't say that. I just said, because paper is louder than her mouth. Hargrove emailed us a copy of the court filing he'd prepared. Temporary restraining instructions on trust assets, notice of breach, demand for preservation of evidence. At the bottom was the line that mattered. Any attempt to destroy or alter records may constitute spoliation and expose the actor to sanctions. In plain language, if she deletes, she pays. My father read it twice. Then he whispered, "She's going to panic." "Good," I said. Panicked people make mistakes in writing. That evening, Darlene did exactly what I expected. She tried to return to the house, not with luggage, with performance. She arrived at 7:42 p.m., as if she'd simply stepped out for a manicure, and the world was ready to apologize. Crying, shaking. Sunglasses. My father opened the door, and she pushed past him like she still had keys to everything. "I didn't sleep," she sobbed loudly, making sure the neighbors could hear. "I've been humiliated. I've been attacked, and now I'm being locked out of my own life." My half-sister stood behind my father, frozen. I stood to the side, quiet. Darlene saw me and immediately turned her tears into rage. "You," she hissed. "You did this." My father didn't move aside for her this time. "Stop," he said. Darlene blinked, confused. "Excuse me," he repeated it. "Stop." Her mouth opened like she was going to bite him with words. "You can't. You're not in charge," my father said, still not raising his voice. "You haven't been for a long time." I just didn't admit it. Darlene's eyes darted to my half-sister, searching for her old leverage. "Sweetheart," she cried, turning on the softness again. "Tell your father he's making a mistake." My half-sister shook her head. Tiny, devastated. "No." Darlene's face went rigid. That was the moment she realized the bride wasn't her shield anymore. So she turned back to my father with her final card. Dirty, nuclear, whispered like a curse. "She's not yours," Darlene said. "You know that." My father went still. My stomach tightened, because in that sentence, Darlene revealed the most important thing. She didn't just suspect. She believed she owned the truth. My father's voice was low, controlled, deadly calm. "I don't know anything," he said, "because you turned my life into a stage where only you got to speak." Darlene stepped closer, eyes wide, desperate. "If you freeze me out, I will burn everything. I will tell everyone." "I will," my father lifted a hand, not to hit, to stop her like a traffic signal. "We already filed," he said. "You're served, your access is restricted, and your calls are being documented." Darlene's mouth trembled. You wouldn't do that." My father looked at me for half a second, then back at her. I am, he said. And in that moment, something in Darlene's face shifted from anger to calculation, like she was trying to find an exit. I stepped forward, finally. Darlene, I said softly, before you say another word, remember. Every lie you tell now has to survive a lab result. Her eyes flickered, fear. Because she suddenly remembered the one thing she couldn't bully. Science with paperwork. My father's tone didn't change. You need to leave, he said. Darlene laughed, small, cruel. Or what? You'll call security like your little trustee did? My father didn't flinch. Yes, he said. The word landed like a gavel. Darlene stared at him, stunned. Then she did the only thing she could do when the mask fell off completely. She spat venom and backed toward the door. You're going to regret this, she whispered. Both of you. When the truth comes out, you'll have nothing. I held her gaze, calm. No, I said. When the truth comes out, you'll have no story left. My father opened the door. And Darlene walked out of the house like a queen being exiled. Chin up, tears wiped, rage barely contained. The door shut. The house went quiet. My half-sister slid down the wall onto the floor, sobbing. My father stood in the hallway staring at the wood grain of the door like he could read his entire life in it. And I stood there, breathing evenly, because I'd learned something powerful. When a bully loses access, they don't become weak. They become loud. And loud people leave trails. 2 days later, the lab called. Hargrove insisted we come in. Results aren't delivered over the phone, he said. Not with this level of risk. We sat in the same conference room, same glass walls, same quiet office outside, different people inside. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years. My half-sister clutched a tissue until it shredded in her hand. Hargrove opened the envelope. He read silently. Then he placed the result face down on the table and looked at my father. Before you see it, he said, understand. The trust memorandum your mother left becomes active immediately after this. My father swallowed. Active how? Hargrove's voice was flat. It determines who has authority, who gets access, and who is permanently barred. My father nodded, barely breathing. Show me. Hargrove flipped the paper over. I didn't feel my heart beat. I felt it pause. My father stared, his lips parted, then he made a sound. Small, broken, not a word. My half-sister whispered, what does it say? My father couldn't answer. So I read it out loud, because I wasn't letting anyone control the air anymore. It says, I said, voice steady, paternity excluded. My half-sister let out a strangled sob. My father's face went white. But I kept reading, because the page didn't end there. Hargrove slid the second sheet forward. The memorandum. This, he said, is your mother's instruction. My father's voice cracked. She knew. Hargrove nodded once. She suspected. She planned accordingly. She made the trust irrevocable, named you as beneficiary with conditions, and named her granddaughter. He nodded toward me, as trustee with sole authority. My father stared at me like he didn't know whether to grieve or apologize or collapse. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just breathed, because the truth was finally standing in the room without being whispered. My father whispered, then who is her father? Hargrove's eyes stayed on the memo. Your mother wrote, do not chase the past, protect the future. The identity of the biological father is irrelevant to the trust's purpose. That was Grandma. Cold, clean, protective. My father put his face in his hands. My half-sister cried harder. And I sat very still, because what I felt wasn't loss. It was something I'd never had permission to feel before. Freedom. Hargrove slid a final page across. Given Darlene's unauthorized signatures and attempted interference, he said, we can proceed with full removal actions, restraining order against trust interference, demand for restitution to vendors if misrepresentation caused damages, and formal notice to banks and counterparties that she has no authority. My father lifted his head slowly. His eyes were red. His voice was hoarse. Do it, he said, 2 words, but they were the first 2 words he'd ever said that protected me with action. Hargrove nodded. We will. My father looked at me then, and the shame in his face wasn't theatrical. It was real. I don't know how to fix what I did, he whispered. I didn't punish him with silence the way he punished me. I gave him the boundary. You don't fix it with speeches, I said. You fix it with consistency. He nodded like he would take any instruction if it meant he didn't lose what was left. My half-sister wiped her face, shaky. So, what are we to each other now? I turned to her calm. We're what we decide, I said. Not what Darlene says, not what blood says, what we choose, she nodded through tears. And in that moment, the story finally became what Grandma had built it to be. Not revenge for revenge's sake. Justice. Protection. A door that didn't slam shut but didn't stay unlocked for wolves. As we stood to leave, my father stopped me in the hallway. His voice was barely a whisper. "Are you going to disappear?" I looked at him for a long second. Then I said the line that ended my whole life with him, and started a new one. "I'm not closing the door," I told him, calm as a final stamp. "But I decide when it opens," and for the first time he didn't argue. He just nodded. Because he finally understood. I wasn't begging to be chosen anymore. I was choosing myself. The next week didn't feel like victory. It felt like air. Like someone finally opened a window in a room I'd been suffocating in for years. Hargrove moved fast. Quiet filings, preservation notices, bank letters that didn't argue, just restricted access pending trustee verification. Vendors were instructed, in writing, that any authorization from Darlene was void. My father signed every document he needed to sign with the same stiff hand that used to sign away my silence. Darlene tried to fight it the only way she knew. Noise. She posted vague quotes about betrayal. She called relatives. She cried to neighbors. She even showed up at church with mascara streaks and a story about a greedy girl stealing a family. But there was one problem. Every lie she told required one thing to survive: access. And she didn't have it anymore. 2 mornings after the lab results, Darlene's attorney sent a threatening email. Hargrove replied with 1 paragraph and 6 attachments. Vendor statements, signature pages, timestamps, and the clause she triggered the moment she tried to have me removed. That day, her threats stopped sounding sharp. They started sounding desperate. My father didn't call me to vent. He didn't call me to ask me to be the bigger person. He called to say, she tried to enter the bank again. They refused. They told her to contact counsel. He sounded shocked every time the world didn't bend for her. I wasn't, because the world doesn't bend for people like Darlene. It bends for paper. At the same time, my half-sister stopped pretending. She came to Hargrove's office once quietly and asked a single question with a trembling voice. Did she ever love any of us? Or just what we gave her? Nobody answered, because the answer was too clean. She sat beside me anyway. Not because blood demanded it, because reality did. CTA 1, after 200 words, drop your city plus local time in the comments and tell me, if someone humiliated you publicly, would you choose quiet legal revenge or loud confrontation? Darlene's final attempt was predictable. She tried to flip the script by accusing my father of cheating and claiming the trust was illegal. She wanted chaos. She wanted emotion. She wanted me yelling so she could point and say, "See? Unstable." Instead, Hargrove filed for a temporary restraining order against interference with trust operations. Then he sent a notice to Darlene's attorney. Any further contact with vendors, banks, or beneficiaries would be treated as intentional interference. She didn't reply. She couldn't. Because replying would have meant writing something down. And written lies become exhibits. On Friday, my father met me at the house. Our house, the one Darlene once walked through like she owned the walls. He stood in the doorway with a cardboard box in his hands. "Her things," he said. I didn't take the box. I didn't need to. Watching him hold it was enough. "Did she call?" I asked. He nodded 60 times. Then she left a voicemail saying she'd forgive me if I fixed it. I exhaled once. Almost a laugh, not from humor, from disbelief that she still believed forgiveness was currency. My father's voice cracked. "I'm sorry." This time I didn't nod like it was something new. I nodded like it was something he would have to repeat with action for the rest of his life. "Consistency," I reminded him. He swallowed. "I know." We walked into the living room where the wedding photos used to hang. He'd taken them down. The wall looked bare, like a stage after the props are removed. My half-sister came in last. She placed a small framed photo on the table, one of Grandma, stern and elegant, eyes sharp as a verdict. "She knew," my half-sister whispered. I touched the frame lightly. She planned. And then we did the thing Darlene never expected. We stopped talking about her. We talked about boundaries. About how my father would handle calls. About how my half-sister would answer relatives. About how Hargrove would respond to any legal noise. About how any future contact would go through counsel. We didn't slam the door. We installed a lock. CTA 2 after 500 words. If you've ever had to set a boundary with family, comment locked and tell me. Should a toxic person get a second chance, or just a closed door? 2 days later, the sheriff served Darlene the final notice at her sister's address. Not handcuffs. Not shouting. Just paper delivered by a man who didn't care about her tears. By then, everyone had heard some version of the story. Darlene tried to make herself the victim, but the truth moved through the family like electricity. She had signed where she shouldn't. She had tried to erase me and ended up exposing herself. And the most humiliating part for her wasn't being escorted out of a wedding. It was that the people she used to command stopped answering her calls. Because once power leaves your voice, all you have left is volume. And volume doesn't pay bills. One evening, as the sun dropped and the house went quiet, my father stood by the front door with his hand on the lock. "Are you leaving?" he asked me. It wasn't a guilt question. It was fear. He had finally realized what it cost to ignore someone until they learned to survive without you. I looked at him. Really looked. A man who chose silence for years, now standing in the wreckage of that choice. "I'm not disappearing," I said. His shoulders loosened like he'd been holding his breath. "But listen," I added, calm and final. "I'm not reopening my life to anyone who tried to destroy it." He nodded, eyes wet. I didn't hug him. I didn't forgive him with a scene. I gave him the truth that would keep me safe. "I'm not closing the door," I said, fingers resting on the lock. "But I decide when it opens." Outside, the streetlights flickered on like ordinary life. Inside, for the first time, I didn't feel like the invisible child bidding its place at a table. I felt like the person holding the keys. And somewhere across town, Darlene could scream into the phone all night. But paper wouldn't scream back. It would simply stand, unmoved, permanent.